Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining Upstream Fly Guy. Today we're going to be tying up the Lite Brite Perdigon in a pink fluorescent style here. This is a really cool pattern, works very well in spring, summer months when fish are a little bit more active. Also with the resin coating, it helps really sink the fly down, so if you're looking for something to be a point fly and help your Euro nymphing rig get down, this is a great fly to add. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into things here. I'm going to be using a size 16 jig hook, specifically the Hanak 450. I like the wide gap that it has, holds fish very well. And I'm also using a 2.8 millimeter tungsten bead head. I'm going to go with a gold color. You'll see why towards the end. I think it just makes things really come together and looks crisp. Thread, I'm using Semperfli and specifically a light pink color. I would say honestly for the foundation, try to keep it pretty light as far as how many wraps you're giving it. So that's going to start things off. From there, I am using Coq De Leon Feathers, and these fibers are awesome. They hold together incredibly well. I would say, honestly, you only need about 4 to 5. That way, you're not adding too much girth and making the body of this fly a little bit more round than it needs to be. So I'm going to go ahead and pinch wrap that in and just work that down towards the base of the hook. I think I have a couple more than 5, but that's alright. At the end of the day, the fish don't seem to mind. Alright. Now from there, you're going to work your thread back up towards the bead. Try and cover in as much of those feather details that you may have left on there as well. At this point, you'll need a piece of UV pink Krystal Flash. I am actually, to make my life easier and to add uniformity to this fly, I always actually put that tip of Krystal Flash into the bead head, give it a couple wraps around, and then now I start to work that down towards the Coq De Leon Feathers. And I'm going to move back up and just make sure everything's secured in there really well. And also build up a little bit of a taper towards the head to make this look a little bit more realistic once we put the resin on. Alright, so this step here can be a little bit tricky if you don't have a vise that twists. What I'll say, even if you do have a vise that twists, your first 2 wraps around, I would say do that manually, and then after that you can start to spin it out. I would say like your next turn should be covering half of your previous turn, and then the other half should be in some new territory. And then that'll cover this up really well, especially once we get to the point with some resin, and help this really stand out with that UV glossy look to it. And go ahead and snip off any sort of excess. Alright, perfect. So we're getting close here, guys. What I'm going to do, we're going to change threads. So I'm actually going to tie in a whip finish toward the bead head. and then I'm going to be using a very fluorescent pink Semperfli color, and we're going to use that as a hot spot. It contrasts it very well, so I definitely encourage you not to stick with that light pink color, otherwise it's going to be very uniform. It's not going to stand out. I know trout in particular love a good hot spot, especially near me here in PA. So I'm going to add that in. Now I'm going to use a little bit of super glue just to really cement this down and make sure that these threads aren't going anywhere. Same thing for that Krystal Flash. And then I'm going to whip finish this off as well. Okay, now you could stop here. I personally like to add the nail polish look to the head of the bead. I think it makes it look a little bit more realistic. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, with any slotted bead, there's a pretty big gap in there. So when I apply this, I really want to get into that gap and brush that polish in there. Once I feel like I've covered it enough, I'm going to continue applying in that same area to add some buildup, and that helps so that way you don't necessarily need to do a second coat of nail polish. If you do it effectively, typically can just get away with one. Now, what will happen here, you want to probably tie about 6 to 12 of these at this point, so that way you'll let them dry and you don't have to worry about anything after that. I have one that I have from previously that is dried as well. I did one coat of resin with this already, so you can kind of get a sense of where this looks from a finished product standpoint. But I'm going to add another one here just to sort of even some of these areas out. And my technique for this, if you have Solarez bone dry, I extremely love that. I think it's easier than Loon because you're able to just brush this in, and again, if you have that spin vise, you basically just work it around until you feel like it's pretty equal. When that's the case, just go ahead and hit it with the UV light. 5 to 10 seconds will do the trick. And that is that. That is the Light Brite Perdigon pink style. It's an awesome pattern. Would highly recommend it. Don't forget to hit subscribe, guys. Go ahead and add a like as well. If you tie this in your box, I'd love to hear how it goes for you. Thanks for joining us at Upstream Fly Guy, and stay fishy.